We look at the Great Pyramid of Giza and think we know it. For thousands of years, we have stood before that stone monument, hearing the same story over and over, a simple and comfortable narrative. It is the story of an all-powerful pharaoh who commanded tens of thousands of slaves over 20 years of superhuman effort to erect his eternal tomb. It is the story found in school books, repeated tirelessly by tour guides, the foundation upon which the careers of Egyptologists were built and the trajectory of Egyptian civilization was based. But this story, so familiar and accepted, is beginning to be questioned, a narrative that perhaps cannot stand when confronted with cold, relentless mathematics. Forget an archaeologist's pickaxe or a yellowed papyrus. Our tool today will be the artificial intelligence axiom, an analytical system capable of processing mountains of data to reveal what is hidden from human eyes. We will deal only with numbers, physics, and logic, ignoring assumptions. Our investigation begins by questioning whether Bronze Age man could have built the Great Pyramid. The answer we will find will shake your most profound beliefs to their core. Accepting the official version as our starting point, Egyptology tells us that the Pyramid of Khufu was erected in about 20 years. It is composed of approximately 2,300,000 stone blocks. The total weight of the structure exceeds 6 million tons. Each block weighs on average 2.5 tons, but there are giants of 70 and even 80 tons. The workforce was essentially an army of peasants, occupied in their fields for 9 months of the year. Only during the 3 months of the Nile's flood could they be summoned for state works. It sounds logical on paper, thousands of people, many years of work. But the logic crumbles when we look at the numbers. The secret lies in a simple arithmetic calculation. We fed these official data into Axiom to perform a stress test on the logistical model. The system needed to answer a single question. What was the actual work speed required to finish the project on time? The result was staggering. To finish the pyramid in 20 years, working 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without a single day off, the builders would have had to quarry, transport, finish, and perfectly set one block every 2.5 minutes, one block every 150 seconds, day and night in summer and winter, for 20 consecutive years. Forget lightweight bricks. We are dealing with colossal multi-ton rocks that first needed to be cut from the mountain, then delivered from kilometers away, and finally raised to a height of nearly 150 meters. The conventional view presents us with this scenario, but let's explore if it truly aligns with what we know of the laws of physics. Let's break down this impossible cycle, starting with the quarrying. Most of the pyramid is made of limestone quarried right there on the Giza plateau, but for the inner chambers and the sarcophagus, super hard granite from Aswan was used. The quarries of Aswan are more than 800 kilometers south of Giza. The tools the Egyptians possessed were primitive copper chisels and stone spheres. Copper is a very soft metal, completely useless against granite. We asked Axiom to simulate the process of quarrying a single 70-ton granite block, using only this technology. The simulation showed that to extract a block of this size, it would require years of continuous work from thousands of men. And there are dozens of such blocks in the pyramid. All of them needed to be quarried within that absurd time frame. Quarrying the stone is just the beginning of the nightmare. The real challenge was moving these monsters. How do you transport a 70-ton monolith from Aswan to Giza? The official version says by boats on the Nile, but what boats could handle this weight? We are talking about fragile vessels of reed and wood, held together by ropes. Axiom analyzed all known data on shipbuilding in ancient Egypt. Axiom's verdict is definitive. There is no physical evidence of ships capable of transporting loads of more than 30 tons. The transport of these giants by the Nile is a myth, without any basis in engineering calculations. And what about the millions of limestone blocks? They say they used wooden sleds. Axiom calculated the environmental impact of this. To create enough sleds, it would have been necessary to cut down all the forests of Egypt and Lebanon. This would cause an unprecedented ecological catastrophe of which there is no trace. Then remains the most impressive stage, the construction itself. How were the blocks lifted? The most popular theory speaks of a giant ramp, but mathematics once again is merciless. To maintain a gentle angle, a straight ramp to the top of the pyramid would have to be more than 1.5 kilometers long. Calculations show that building such a ramp would require more material and labor than the pyramid itself. And the main question, where did this colossal structure go afterward? Did it evaporate? Millions of tons of stone simply vanished without a trace. Other theories, like a spiral ramp, are even worse. They would cover the faces of the pyramid, making it impossible to maintain the geometric precision we see today. With so many unanswered questions, the conventional narrative about the construction of the Great Pyramid invites us to explore other possibilities. It contradicts mathematics, physics, logistics, and common sense. The great work could not have been done by those to whom it is attributed, and this leads us to the most unsettling question of all. If it wasn't them, then who was it? And more importantly, how? In the first part, we challenged the myth of brute force with an analysis of astonishing numbers. Mathematics showed us that the official story, with its armies of workers and primitive tools, is a house of cards that collapses at the slightest breath of logic. The question of who built the pyramid remains, but the even deeper question is how. If the enigma of the Great Pyramid is not a matter of the quantity of hands, perhaps it is a matter of the quality of the mind behind the project. The focus of our analysis now shifts from the impossible work to the impossible precision. We will open a sarcophagus empty of mummies, but full of something much more valuable, the intelligence of its creators. An intelligence that thought in categories inaccessible to the man of that era. We leave behind brute effort to enter the domain of the mind. Welcome to the geometry of the gods. When we speak of precision, we are not referring to well-laid stones. We are talking about precision engineering on a planetary scale frozen in rock. Let's start with the base. The Pyramid of Khufu rests on a rock foundation of more than 53,000 square meters. That is the area of 10 football fields. Well, this gigantic foundation was leveled with a deviation that does not exceed 2 centimeters. Visualizing this task is an exercise in humility. You do not have laser levels, theodolites, or any modern surveying instruments. You have only primitive sights and, as we are told, copper tools. Official Egyptology suggests the water level theory. Supposedly, the builders dug a network of channels, filled them with water, and used its perfectly flat surface as a reference. It sounds ingenious. We entered this hypothesis into Axiom for a hydrodynamic and climatic simulation. The system considered the average temperature on the Giza Plateau, wind speed, solar radiation, and the porosity of the limestone. The result completely destroys this beautiful theory. In such a vast area, water evaporation would occur unevenly, creating errors of centimeters per day. The slightest wind would create ripples, distorting the level, and the water would inevitably leak into the porous limestone. Axiom's simulation shows that the probability of achieving the observed precision with this method is negligible. The creators used a different, far more advanced method, the traces of which we either do not see or cannot comprehend. But that is just the foundation. The real miracle begins when we look up. The Great Pyramid is oriented to the cardinal points with phenomenal precision. Its faces point to true geographic north, south, east, and west. The error is only 3/60ths of a degree, the equivalent of 3 arc minutes. It is a precision that medieval cathedral builders with the best compasses of their time would envy. The compass, by the way, was unknown in ancient Egypt and points to the magnetic pole, not the geographic one. How did they achieve this? The theory says they observed the stars. Axiom calculated the error of this method, considering atmospheric refraction. The verdict was disheartening. Even under perfect conditions, the error would be at least 1/4 of a degree, 5 times greater than what we see in reality. Now let's move from the general outlines to the individual blocks. Originally, the pyramid was covered by 144,000 white limestone casing stones, polished to a mirror-like sheen. They were fitted so tightly that the gap between them was no more than 0.5 millimeter. The blade of a knife cannot enter this space. The scale of this is hard to comprehend. What we see there is more akin to the fitting of parts in precision mechanical engineering than to traditional masonry. To achieve this, each of the 144,000 casing stones needed to have perfectly flat faces and perfectly right angles. How was this done with copper saws and sand? Axiom's analysis showed that it would take centuries of manual polishing for each individual block. The pinnacle of this impossible precision is hidden inside the pyramid, in the so-called King's Chamber. The walls, floor and ceiling are made of Aswan granite, one of the hardest minerals on Earth. But the main artifact is the sarcophagus. Carved from a single 3-ton piece of granite, it is a technological masterpiece. Its internal surfaces are perfectly flat. Its internal corners are perfectly straight, as if they had been milled by a modern numerical control machine. But how? Any impact tool would leave rounded corners and an irregular surface. What we see here is something else. The most striking discovery came from engineer Christopher Dunn. He found, inside the sarcophagus and on other granite artifacts, the marks of tubular drilling. Most revealing are the spiral grooves left by the tool. Analysis of these grooves shows that the drill penetrated the granite at a speed hundreds of times faster than is possible with manual drilling. Axiom calculated the physical parameters required. To cut granite at this speed, the drill would need to spin at an extremely high rotation under tons of pressure. These are the specifications of a powerful industrial machine, not of a man turning a copper tube. The pyramid builders mastered the high-precision machining of super-hard rocks. 4,500 years ago, all this geometry, all this precision is not for a tomb. No pharaoh would demand or even notice it. The technical features point to a complex instrument disguised as a tomb. And this leads us to a new question. If the pyramid was not a tomb, what was it for? So far, our journey has shown us that the Great Pyramid could not have been built with the strength and tools of the Bronze Age. Mathematics has debunked the logistics. Engineering has revealed a precision that borders on the supernatural. We stand before a work that seems to have been guided by a far superior intelligence. But every project of this magnitude begins with a plan, a master plan. And what if the precision we saw in the rock, in the cuts and angles, was merely a reflection of an even greater precision, engraved not on the ground, but directly in the sky? The Giza complex is much more than a set of tombs. It is a map frozen in stone that points to a specific place, and even more incredibly, to a specific time in a past so remote that it challenges history itself. The enigma evolves from an impossible work to an impossible map, the code in the stars. At first glance, the layout of the 3 great pyramids on the Giza plateau seems strange. The 2 largest, those of Khufu and Khafre, are almost aligned, but the third, Menkaure, is smaller and visibly offset to the side. Why? Why break a nearly perfect symmetry? For decades, Egyptologists blamed the terrain or the whim of a pharaoh. They were looking for the answer on Earth when they only needed to look up. In 1994, researcher Robert Bauval proposed a hypothesis that forever changed our view of Giza. He suggested that the location of the 3 pyramids exactly replicates the position of the 3 stars of Orion's belt. We fed this theory, known as the Orion correlation theory, into our axiom system for an impartial verification. The system overlaid the map of Giza with the map of the night sky. The result was astonishing. The correspondence was perfect. The largest pyramid, Khufu's, corresponds to the brightest star, Al-Nitak. The second, Khafre's, to the central star, Al-Nilam. And the smallest and offset one, Menkaure's, corresponds precisely to the third and least bright star, Mintaka. The misalignment that seemed like an error was, in fact, an act of genius, reproducing the celestial pattern with absolute fidelity. Axiom calculated the probability of this being a coincidence. The chance of a multi-level correspondence like this, position and relative brightness, being a fluke is less than 1 in a million. It is not a coincidence. It is a design. But the most shocking part was yet to come. The map of the sky is not static. Due to a phenomenon called the precession of the equinoxes, the Earth's axis wobbles slowly, like a giant spinning top, completing a cycle every 25,920 years. This wobble changes the apparent position of the stars over the millennia. The correlation between the pyramids and Orion in Khufu's time, around 2500 BC, was good, but it was not perfect. Bauval asked himself, was there a time in the past when the correspondence was absolute? To verify this, an astronomical simulation was run backward in time in search of the point of perfect alignment. The system began to rewind the millennia. 3000 BC, 4000, 5000. The image became increasingly precise. And then at the mark of 10,500 BC, the simulation stopped. At that moment, and only at that moment, the stars of Orion's belt occupied a position in the sky that duplicated with mathematical precision the plan of the pyramids on Earth, 10,500 BC. This date presents a profound challenge to the traditionally accepted historical timeline. According to the accepted timeline, there was no civilization at that time. It was the Stone Age, a time of hunters and gatherers living in caves, and we are asked to believe that in this exact period, someone developed the master plan for the most sophisticated structure on the planet, encoding in it astronomical data of the highest complexity. The map, in fact, is even larger. The Nile River runs alongside the Giza Plateau, just as the bright band of the Milky Way passes beside the constellation of Orion in the sky. Axiom compared the geography of the Nile with the projection of the Milky Way and, again, found an undeniable correlation. The Giza complex is a three-dimensional model of a portion of our sky, with the pyramids being Orion and the Nile being the Milky Way. And this map points to a date, 10,500 BC. How can we reconcile this with the evidence that does point to the time of the pharaohs? The mystery deepens with the so-called ventilation shafts. We know they are not for ventilation. They are astronomical sites, and they point to specific stars, like Orion and Sirius, in their exact positions in the sky around 2500 BC. It is like a manufacturer's plate with the assembly date. So, we have a master plan dated to 10,500 BC, and a commissioning date of 2500 BC, an interval of 8,000 years between the design and the execution. What does this mean? Axiom proposes a single logical model, where the project was created by a highly advanced civilization in the 11th millennium BC. 8,000 years later, the pharaohs of Egypt found these structures. Perhaps they completed or refurbished them and appropriated their glory. Khufu was not the architect. He was at most the last foreman. The question now is different. If these designers possessed such astronomical knowledge, what kind of technology did they use in their daily lives? The clues are everywhere, hidden in plain sight, and they speak of a power that the official history insists on ignoring. Our investigation so far has led us to an inescapable conclusion. Behind the Giza complex, there is an intelligence with an astonishing command of mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. We have seen that the work was logistically impossible. The precision was superhuman, and the master plan was written in the stars, pointing to an unthinkable antiquity. But knowledge, however advanced, is inert without the tools to apply it. If they could design with such perfection, they needed tools to materialize that perfection. If they could calculate stellar cycles of 26,000 years, their technologies went far beyond copper chisels and plant fiber ropes. Where are these technologies? Where are the machines, the power sources, the equipment? Archaeologists shrug and insist they find nothing but primitive artifacts. But what if we are looking in the wrong way? What if the evidence has always been right in front of us, but we failed to recognize it? Hidden in plain sight, disguised as ritual objects, miscatalogued as mythological symbols. The time has come to pull back the veil that covers these silent witnesses, the artifacts of a lost technology. Let's start with a simple question. How did the ancient Egyptians illuminate the deep chambers of their tombs and temples? Many of these spaces extend for tens of meters into solid rock, where absolute darkness reigns. The walls and ceilings of these places are covered with delicate paintings and complex hieroglyphs. To perform such detailed work, a bright and stable light source is necessary. The official answer is that they used torches and oil lamps. But this answer conceals a colossal contradiction. Any open flame produces soot, a black greasy layer that inevitably settles on the walls and especially on the ceiling. However, the ceilings of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings are pristine. There is not a single trace of soot. Decades of theories, such as the use of mirrors to reflect sunlight, have been debunked by practical experiments. Light loses 99% of its intensity after a few turns in narrow corridors. So what light did they use? The answer may be carved on the walls of the mysterious Temple of Hathor at Dendera, in an underground crypt we find a bas-relief unlike anything else in Egyptian art. We see human figures holding huge pear-shaped objects. Inside each object, a wavy line resembling a serpent extends from one end to the other. The base of these objects rests on a lotus flower-shaped support, from which a thick cable leads to a kind of box. Egyptology offers us a symbolic explanation. It is a creation myth. But let's look at this image with the eyes of an engineer. The pear-shaped object is a glass bulb with a partial vacuum. The internal serpent actually represents an electrical discharge, a plasma filament. The lotus flower at the base is a socket, an electrical insulator. The thick cable is a power cord, and the box is the power source. The most revealing element is the pillar supporting it all, known as the Jed pillar, officially a symbol of stability. But its form, a series of insulators on a rod, is identical to the design of a 19th century high-voltage insulator. Axiom compared the Dendera relief with diagrams of electrical devices and found an almost perfect resemblance to early gas discharge lamps, like the Crookes tube, a cold light source that produces no soot and is ideal for work in confined spaces. Could what we see in Dendera be more than a myth? Could it be a technical manual? The image suggests a knowledge of something akin to electric light. If they mastered light, what about air? In 1898, in a tomb at Saqqara, a small wooden object was found. For decades it was stored in the Cairo Museum, labeled as a toy bird, but it has no legs or feathers. Its wings have a clear aerodynamic profile designed to create lift. And most importantly, its tail is vertical, like an airplane's rudder, not horizontal like a bird's. A vertical stabilizer provides directional stability in flight, a purely aeronautical concept. We created an exact three-dimensional model of the Saqqara bird and fed it into Axiom for a digital wind tunnel simulation. The conclusion was shocking. The object is a highly efficient model of a glider with ideal flight characteristics. The vertical tail eliminates the toy hypothesis. That is a technical model of an aircraft. For light and for flight, you need energy. And here we find another piece of the puzzle in ancient Mesopotamia, the Baghdad battery, a clay jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod, dated to around 200 years BC. When filled with an acidic solution, like grape juice, it produces an electric current. This is a proven fact. They knew the principles of galvanic power generation. Axiom analyzed the probability of the lamp, the glider, and the battery being isolated coincidences. The chance is statistically nil. The system sees a clear connection. They are fragments of the same lost technological tapestry, a technology based on electricity that would explain how they cut and drilled granite, with the precision we saw earlier. Not with copper, but perhaps with ultrasonic tools or high-powered drills. Electricity was the key, and the Dendera lamp is the outlet they left on the wall of history. We have found the traces. In Dendera, the image of a light that produces no smoke. In Saqqara, the model of a flying machine. In Baghdad, the spark of a chemical battery. Fragments of a forgotten technology hidden in the heart of Egypt. So far, our investigation has focused on the Nile Valley, and therein lies a great trap for our understanding. We run the risk of seeing all this as an isolated miracle, an inexplicable phenomenon that was born and died in the desert sands. But what if the Giza Plateau is not the epicenter, but just one of the capitals? What if the pyramid is not a unique work, but just the most famous node in a planetary network of megalithic constructions erected by the same hand? To understand the full picture, we need to expand the map of our search. We leave Egypt behind and embark on a journey to the most enigmatic places on the planet. We will be looking for the same technological signature, the same engineering genius, the same impossible precision. We will gather the evidence for the existence of a single global project, the signature of a global project. Our first stop, the dizzying heights of the Andes in Bolivia. Here at almost 4,000 meters above sea level, in the thin air where even breathing is difficult, lie the ruins of Puma Punku. Official science attributes them to the Tiahuanaco culture, around the 6th century of our era. But what we see here has no connection whatsoever with the technology of the Andean peoples. We see the remains of a modular construction, like a giant building set that has been disassembled. The material is andesite and diorite, extremely hard volcanic rocks almost as resistant as diamond. Bronze tools are useless against them. Even so, the site is covered with gigantic blocks with perfect geometric shapes, surfaces polished like mirrors, and 90-degree angles so precise they seem laser-cut. Most impressive are the so-called H-blocks, dozens of identical, standardized pieces with a complex design of multiple interlocking joints, grooves, and perforations. They look like they came off the assembly line of a high-tech factory. Axiom analyzed three-dimensional scans of these blocks. The system confirmed it. The size deviation between different pieces is less than a fraction of a millimeter. This is mass production of standardized components. Analysis of the holes revealed marks of high-speed drilling. The technology behind Puma Punku exhibits the same signature of advanced engineering that we saw in the granite boxes of Egypt. This is the first point on our global map. Now let's go further north to Peru near the legendary city of Cusco. There stand the walls of Sacsayhuaman, 3 rows of cyclopean walls built with limestone blocks weighing between 100 and 200 tons. Some exceed 360 tons. But it is not the weight that is shocking, it is the method. It is the so-called polygonal masonry. The blocks are not rectangular. Each one is a unique polygon, with up to 12 sides or more. And these immense asymmetrical rocks are fitted together without any kind of mortar, with such absurd precision that you cannot insert a knife blade between them. How? How do you give such a complex shape to a 200-ton block and then fit it perfectly with its neighbors, like pieces of a 3-dimensional puzzle? Axiom simulated the process and concluded that a trial-and-error method would be logistically absurd. The only explanation is a technology capable of softening the stone, or of scanning and cutting it perfectly on the first attempt. And here is the crucial fact. On top of these megalithic walls, the Incas, who arrived much later, built their own structures with small irregular stones joined by mortar. They found these walls, admired them as the work of gods, but could not replicate the technology. It is the exact same scenario as in Egypt, a later civilization appropriating the legacy of a much older and more advanced one. The signature is the same. We cross the largest ocean on the planet and arrive in Micronesia at the lost city of Nan Madol, an archipelago of nearly 100 artificial islands built on a coral reef, made of gigantic basalt blocks weighing up to 50 tons. The total weight of the material exceeds 700,000 tons. The paradox is that on the neighboring island, there is no basalt in such quantity, nor a sufficient population, nor wood for rafts, nor the technology for such a feat. Local legends speak of magic, of stones that flew through the air. We dismiss magic and ask Axiom about the logistics. The answer showed that the project would be unfeasible with primitive technologies. The legends of flying stones are the only way a primitive mind could describe a technology it did not understand, whether it be sonic levitation or advanced transport vehicles. Puma Punku, Sacsayhuaman, Nan Madol, Axiom analyzed the technological markers of these and other sites, like Baalbek in Lebanon and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. The verdict is final. The probability of dozens of isolated cultures having independently invented and then forgotten the same set of super technologies is 0. And this leads us to consider the possibility of a global civilization in prehistory. We see their works, but we do not see them. Where are they? This question leads us to seek answers no longer in stone, but in the most ancient memory of humanity itself. Up to this point, we have acted as engineers and geologists. We have weighed the stones, measured the angles, analyzed the traces of impossible machines. We have gathered irrefutable evidence of a prehistoric civilization with a technological signature spread across the entire planet, from Puma Punku to Egypt, from Baalbek to Nan Madol. We see their works, grandiose, silent, incomprehensible. But we do not see their faces. Who were they, these architects of the world? Where did they come from, and where did they go? The material evidence has brought us to a dead end. The stone holds the secret of how it was cut, but it does not reveal the name of the one who cut it. Therefore, today, we are forced to turn to a different archive, a non-material one. The only library that has survived floods and ice ages, the collective memory of humanity. We will delve into the world of the oldest legends, myths, and sacred texts. We will not look for poetic metaphors in them, but for encoded historical chronicles. Because every legend at its core contains an echo of the truth. And today we will explore how these echoes, coming from every corner of the earth, seem to point to the same shocking possibility. Today we are forced to turn to a different archive, the whisper of universal myths. Our search begins in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. The ancient Sumerians left us thousands of clay tablets, and almost all of them state the same thing. They say that knowledge, civilization, agriculture, writing, laws, and astronomy were not human inventions. They were a gift from beings who came from the heavens. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, which literally translates as those who from heaven to earth came. The text described their arrival in the deep past when humanity was still savage. They were not ethereal spirits or allegorical gods. They were described as beings of flesh and blood, who ate, drank, built, and even waged war. We fed the main Sumerian texts into Axiom for a semantic analysis, filtering out the mythology to extract the core of the original information. The system detected recurring technological markers. The texts mention their celestial barks or shining ships. They described their weapons that produced a glow like lightning and turned enemies to dust. They mention tools with which they cut the mountains as if they were cheese. This is not the language of myth. It is the language of a primitive man trying to describe high technology. A celestial bark is an aircraft. A weapon like lightning is an energy weapon. The tools that cut mountains are the same machines whose traces we found at Giza and Puma Punku. Now we travel to Central America. The main deity of the Mayas and Aztecs was Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent. The legends say he arrived from the sea in a boat that moved without oars. He was a man with fair skin and a beard who taught astronomy, mathematics, and architecture to the tribes. High in the Andes, we find an almost identical story, the civilizing god Viracocha, also described as tall, fair-skinned, and bearded. The legends say it was he who built the cyclopean structures of Tiahuanaco and Puma Punku in a single night, using the power of sound to move the stones. After his mission, he departed over the waters of the Pacific, promising to return. We gave Axiom the task of comparing the myths of civilizing gods from around the world. The system processed more than 500 legends from all 5 continents. The result was overwhelming. Despite enormous cultural differences, the same narrative is repeated in almost 80% of the cases. It always involves 5 elements. It begins with gods arriving from the sky or the sea with a distinct appearance. They bring transformative knowledge and erect megalithic structures. Finally, they depart, promising to return. From the Sumerian Anunnaki and the Egyptian god Thoth to the Peruvian Viracocha and the Greek Titans, we hear the same story told in different languages. Axiom concluded, the probability of dozens of isolated cultures having invented, by chance, the same complex archetype is nil. Could this be a coincidence, or the reflection of a real global event? Perhaps our ancestors witnessed something we now call paleo-contact. They met representatives of a more advanced civilization. Now, the 2 streams of evidence, the material and the immaterial, converge. The Anunnaki, Viracocha, the 7 sages, these are different names for the same group. They came to Earth with a purpose. They possessed technologies that, to the eyes of primitive man, seemed like magic. They created the global network of structures we call megalithic. They gave us the initial push, and then, for some reason, and what if these are echoes, distorted by time, of one of the most important events in the history of our species? But this raises the final and most profound question. Why? What was the purpose of all this titanic work? This forces us to ask the final question. If they were not tombs or temples for the gods, were they then machines of the gods? To answer, we must leave the myths behind and embrace physics. To do that, we must dismantle the official story. We have deciphered a star map engraved on the Earth. We have found the fingerprints of an advanced technology and heard the echo of an ancestral contact in the myths of all peoples. We have reached the conclusion that the megaliths of our world are the legacy of a global civilization, likely of external origin. But the fundamental question persists. What is a colossal project? To answer, we need to stop seeing these structures as dead monuments and start seeing them as what they probably are: machines, functional devices. Today, we set aside archaeology and mythology to speak the language of physics. The planetary energy grid. The first clue is in the material. The inner chambers of the Great Pyramid are made of Aswan granite. Why granite and not the abundant limestone? Official science says it was because it was beautiful and durable. This is the answer of someone who does not want to see. In a high-tech device, the choice of material is dictated by function. Axiom analyzed the composition of Aswan granite. It immediately highlighted its main component. Over 55% is crystalline quartz. Quartz has a unique property called the piezoelectric effect. When compressed or subjected to vibration, it generates an electric charge. And the reverse is also true. Now imagine the king's chamber. Dozens of tons of quartz-rich granite under the pressure of millions of tons of stone above. What if this pressure is part of the design? What if the Earth itself is the source of vibration? Our planet vibrates constantly at very low frequencies. It is its natural pulse. Axiom simulated what would happen if the chamber were a giant resonator tuned to the Earth's pulse. The result was an incredible image. The vibrations of the Earth's crust, amplified by the mass of the pyramid, would cause the quartz in the granite to vibrate in unison. Through the piezoelectric effect, this mechanical vibration would be converted into electrical energy. This transforms the king's chamber into the heart of a geomechanical power plant. But where did this energy go? The pyramid is built with two types of limestone. The outer casing, polished, was an excellent electrical insulator. The inner blocks, more porous and with a high magnesium content, had semiconductor properties. The entire pyramid functioned as a gigantic capacitor, a granite generator in the center, a semiconductor layer around it, and an insulating shell on the outside. The ventilation shafts, perfectly straight, were not for air. They were waveguides that channeled the generated energy to the top. The pyramid was crowned with a capstone of electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, with the best semiconductor properties that exist. The pyramid was not just a power plant. It was a wireless energy transmitter on a planetary scale. And this brings us back to our global map. Axiom analyzed the location of the world's main megalithic sites, not by geography, but by geophysics. A shocking truth emerged. Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, none of them are located by chance. They are positioned at unique points, over tectonic faults, at nodes of the Earth's geomagnetic grid, or over quartz deposits. Their location was chosen with the same criteria we use today to build power plants. All these structures are components of a single energy network that enveloped the planet, capable of extracting, converting, and transmitting the energy of the Earth itself. We are looking at the remains of an ancient electrical grid that powered the civilization of the gods. A clean and powerful grid far beyond our own. This explains everything: the choice of materials, the internal structure, the precise location. But it also leads us to the darkest question of all. If they possessed such power, why did they disappear? What could destroy those who controlled the planet's energy? Was it a catastrophe, a war, or a deliberate departure? Legends like that of Atlantis, which speak of a cataclysm caused by the misuse of energy crystals, could be a distorted memory of a catastrophic failure in this network, an event that plunged the world into a period of forgetting, a global amnesia from which humanity is only now beginning to awaken. Our investigation ends here. We began with a pile of stones in the desert and arrived at the origins of consciousness itself. We have proven that our history is not a straight line of progress, but a drama of cosmic scale with acts of creation, glory, destruction, and forgetting. We are living in the intermission. What comes next depends on us. The legacy of the builders is not a technology, but a choice. The choice between clinging to the familiar narrative or daring to explore a perspective that could change everything. They left us a map of the stars engraved in stone. But the path to those stars we will have to build for ourselves. Axiom's work is done, but your work, the work of assimilating this truth, is just beginning. Think, analyze, and look at the world with new eyes. Because now you know. If you like this investigation, subscribing to the channel helps us expand the Axiom investigation project. We would love to read your thoughts on the video subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us which city you are watching from. Thank you for staying with us until the end.